Hi, and welcome back to another board recap. I have so much to discuss with you. Last week, we had a Board of Supervisors meeting. Then we had a City Council meeting. Then we had the next day a budget hearing meeting. And then we had a special meeting of the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. Then we had a night meeting on Tuesday. So it has been a week of meetings, and I have not given you an update on any of them. So buckle up. I'm going to try to keep it short. Let's go. Let's dive into it. So at last week's Board of Supervisors meeting, the biggest thing, the biggest issue was the Narcan dispensing vending machines. Why was that an issue? Why was that a concern? Well, when you have kids who already feel like they can experiment, that this stuff makes it safe, it worries people that those kids would then go get that and then play with drugs that can kill them. And the thing is, fentanyl is so dangerous. The smallest amount can be fatal. It is not a drug that any of our kids should be messing with, playing with, even if they think it's safe because they have Narcan. And if you are not appropriately prepared to administer it correctly, it fails. I think it was 50% of the time that it fails if you do not understand how to use it. The other problem is when it is readily available, people are more likely to experiment with larger doses or more, or mix in heavier drugs. The problem with that is 30 to 90 minutes after administering Narcan, you can go back into an overdose. And so you still need to go seek medical attention. You can go back into that high. And if you mix it with other medications, other drugs, and you can just, it's not a good thing. So Narcan is already available at all of our Health and Human Services offices. Most of our school sites have it available on campus, but the thing that is nice about that is it was also administered with training. They put any staff member that was interested in being somebody that carries through a training on how to appropriately use it. So Chair Cry suggested maybe because we have a large amount of pallets of this Narcan available, or whatever brand of Narcan it is, that everybody hosts a town hall and then have somebody there to teach people how to use it and then hand it out there. We would just like to see the training with it. We would like to see some oversight. The vending machines will be available at locations where there's not constant monitoring, so you don't know who's using it. They talk about how it's going to collect data and, they're going to get people's information, but people can bypass that, or kids are going to mess with it. Like, you're going to have manipulated data, and there's nothing telling these kids how to use it. And that's really the biggest concern. It's not that we don't want it available. We already have it. So if we have it, we might as well make it available to the community. I just would like to see some oversight. I would like to see some training. And I think that's where Chair Cry's head was as well. So also at the Board of Supervisors meeting, Supervisor Plummer talked about bringing back a letter to send to ask our government to reopen the government and address the government shutdown. That I think was great. I think that it is a good idea, but that I asked that we include Congressman LaMalfa on it. He was not included on the final, but it was sent. So then they talked about West Camp and did a presentation about that. They ended up having a fundraiser that next weekend, but talked about why that is so important to our community. And then they did a presentation on Red Ribbon Week, and they approved for that. And on October 23rd, the bridge will be red. And then on October 25th, they were doing a drug take back at City of Reading City Hall. So that's, R5 was IHSS, and the fact that the costs are higher than the revenue that's coming in, that one passed 5-0. R6 was closed session. There was no reportable items. Rolling into the City of Reading meeting. Okay, so Reading City Council meeting, that one had a presentation by the YMCA, and then they had public comment and the consent agenda, and then they had a presentation on watering and construction, like the difference between Blue Shield and Costco and what was allowed and what was permitted and the taxing on those, what amount of water each type of landscaping uses, that type of thing. And then they went over the REU fiscal reports. Okay, so then at the city council meeting, one of the things that was discussed as well was the contract for the program that our finance department is using. And it's not the actual off the shelf program, but it's who the facilitator is that kind of works through the support issue with the program that we're using. And so the discussion on that was very interesting if you listen to it, because you have certain people on the council that say nothing. Then you have other people on the council that just regurgitate everything that Mr. Robinette says. And then you have Tanessa who's asking questions like, if you're blaming this software and this change for all the failures in our budget, why can we not go to an RFP and ask if other companies will do a better job? Why can't we do a short-term renewal of this agreement and look for another organization and see if they'll do a better job? And Councilman Danuka was on board with that, but they decided to go ahead and go through with that and continue with the same company that they've been using. And that's where Tanessa ended up standing alone, and it was a 4-1 vote. We're going to get into the budget response next, because that's the next meeting that rolls into it. But after that, I had a conversation with Dr. Januka, because I think that he is a good guy and I think that his mind is in the right place. But when I'm saying you need to stand up and vote for what is right, not what's going to pass or, what's popular, this was one of those things. When you have a software and a company in charge of that software, in charge of making sure that we understand it, and we're not getting the results we want, we either need to make a change within the department, or we need to hold this company accountable if the company is who's at fault. And so that vote, in my opinion, should have been a 3-2 vote, with Councilman Danuka standing with Tanessa saying, I would like to go to RFP and see what else is out there. He did back her on that, but then when the vote was no, and it was 3-2 to continue with what was going on, he went ahead and voted with them. And so then it ended up being a 4-1 vote. So then we roll into the budget summary. So the budget meeting was a special meeting that was supposed to be in response to the findings that Councilwoman Audette put out, and then the report that the city of Reading put out in response to her findings. And if you read through the report, you'll see they don't really give an explanation. They do a very watered down version of this is how government finance works. This is why there's confusion. They never really gave an answer. Real Reading did a good job. They kind of did a response to City of Reading's response. And then when we go into the meeting, everybody kind of got their turn to talk. Mr. Robinette, the finance director, got to give his presentation. And even watching that, there's gaps in some of the slides. There's gaps in some of the graphics. There's information where the numbers don't add up. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, right here, this is where those other councilwomen and councilmen are going to ask, well, what happened there? And not one of them did, right? So that was super disheartening. And so what did end up happening was everybody kind of got their turn to talk. And then Mayor Munz looks at Tanessa and says, okay, it's your turn. We're not rehashing all of this and you have about 12 minutes. And she's like, well, I have a slideshow. And he said, you're not doing that. And the whole point of this meeting was to have a transparent and solution to what was going on with our budget. It was to have transparency about where the issues were, have it looked at, have both sides have the conversation that everybody kept denying her the chance to have at previous meetings, and finally move forward. And that was shut down again, over and over and over. So what did end up coming of the whole thing, and don't mind me because I ended up taking like 6 pages of notes. You can see it here. All of this is the budget response meeting. Okay. These are all my notes. If you ever want to read them, good luck. It's kind of messy, but I am more than happy to share. Okay. So her asks were, she wants the finance director to be at all MOU closed session meetings. That way the finance director can give them accurate information on if a MOU is going to put us in a good place or a bad place moving forward. She wants to have grant funding report reformatted, a budget workshop, councilman policy regarding finance, and a basic course for new members. So she wanted the finance director to be in all MOU meetings. She wanted to do the policy on government finance and have a basics course for new members. So those things were agreed upon and voted to come back. What is coming back with direction from staff is to reform the budget workshop and have a finance oversight committee. Now, here's where things get kind of wonky and super disappointing is 3 out of 5 of the council members want to say, we're going to create a finance oversight committee, but we want it to start here and move forward. We don't want to look back to any of the issues. Well, if you listen to some of the speakers during public comment, including a former finance department member and somebody who budgeted the finances in McLeod, there is a spot where there was an issue created and there was this balloon of fake cash or fake numbers that was put into the projections. Well, that balloon has carried forward in these budget cycles, creating these inaccurate numbers. And if we don't ever go back and pop that balloon and figure out where the issue is, moving forward, we don't have accurate numbers. Does that make sense? So what we do need to do is we need to go back and figure out where the mistake occurred and fix it so that we can all move forward. What was suggested, and Councilman Littau might be the most ridiculous elected official I have ever came across, is he suggests, well, since you're looking at is there fraud or wrongdoing or criminal activity here, let's give it to the, grand jury and see what they decide. Well, the grand jury's job is to find out if a crime was committed. She said multiple times, I'm not saying a crime was committed. I'm saying there's an issue in the budget and in the finance department that something is not being looked at right and we are not projecting our numbers correctly. And we need to find and fix that issue. Not that it's a fraud issue, not that it's crime, not that it's anything else that is being made to be. It is very easy for people to say, oh, she's saying that there's this conspiracy and there's this. And, just like how Barry Tippin didn't want any of this oversight. So he's saying, oh, look, she's attacking me. That was not the case. And that's not how it played out. But that was the narrative, because it's easy to then say, oh, wow, and dismiss it as she's just being so mean. That's not what's going on. We need answers. And so to say, well, let's just have the grand jury look at it. Those are people like you and I. Those are retirees. Those are people who might be a homemaker or might be a retired school teacher. These are not finance experts that are going to be looking into this, right? And so it made no sense. That was just the most absurd suggestion. So I really hope when it gets brought back, we have a lot of community support to say we want the Finance Oversight Committee to be made up of people who know what they're looking for. Nolda Short, who works for the county, said she would be more than happy to look into this stuff. So somebody with that type of knowledge who does a great job. She is a numbers expert. She's amazing. I would be honored for her to be somebody that sits on that committee. So I just think that it's really important that we look at who we put on that. And then we definitely say, you need to look at, Tanessa needs to be able to present her budget PowerPoint that she was not allowed to present. That was ridiculous. And then they should look at her report. They should look at the city's report, and they should look at the actual budgets and be able to have access to all of that information. And then we can have a clear picture of what went wrong and how to fix it moving forward, so that moving forward, we have a sound budget. It sounds chaotic. It sounds crazy, but you know what? It is so important. It is beyond important. Okay. So this takes us into Friday night's special meeting for the Board of Supervisors. That one was regarding the True North Mental Health Facility by Signature Health and in partnership and collaboration with Arch Collaborative. They are looking to get grant funding and put in this facility. This vote ended up coming down to a 3-2 vote, with Alan Long and Matt Plummer supporting the projects and supporting moving forward with it. But the items actually on the agenda were to write a letter opposing this project and to approve supporting our Health and Human Services Director, Christy Coleman, who had written a letter of opposition. So those were the two items. It's Christy Coleman's letter of opposition and the board writing a letter of opposition. So the thing is, Christy Coleman and her department have worked with both these agencies, and they saw that this would not be a wise financial decision. There are too many unknowns. There are too many things that have failed. There's too much history of bad decisions being made by these organizations that then when you go into contract and it fails, that burden becomes on us. Well, we don't have the finances to fix these types of issues. If you look at Santa Rosa was one of the examples given, and you look at how many issues they've had, it is a nightmare. And the other thing is, it's not really improving Shasta County's access to mental health. Because it would be a regional facility, so many of the beds and services would be saved for regional areas, not just us, which gives us the same problem that we're running into currently. We have people who attend those meetings every single week who talk about the fact that they had loved ones who were trying to get in these types of facilities. And even though there were beds open because their address was Shasta Lake or their address was Fall River or their address was whatever, that space was not available because that bed was reserved for Redding or that bed was reserved for out of county use. And the thing is, we have plenty of organizations who are showing results, who are doing good work, who just need the support and they need the ability to do the work and not have to save those beds for out of area people. So what we need to do is we need to focus our attentions and we need to focus on programs that will work with Shasta County first. If another county wants to approve this project for their area and have a regional facility, great. But it will not solve our issue here if we are taking care of other people's mess and we are not taking care of our people here. And I'm sorry, but we have far too many veterans who are continually losing their battle. We lose 22 a day to suicide in our country. 22. And we cannot continue to allow that to happen in our community while focusing on people from outside of our community. We need services here. We need to continue to focus on those who fought for us. We need to focus on the veterans. We need to focus on our other at-risk members of our community before we focus on outside the community. We need to make sure that we're getting the mental health for our youth so that our youth are not being sent out of area. We need to focus on mental health for mothers, for children, for veterans, for our elderly. We need to focus on our people. And then once we've had our mess cleaned up, we can help others. And so that was 3-2 to support Christy Coleman and write a letter of opposition. Please do your research on Signature Healthcare and listen to Kevin's radio show. Do your own research. I'm not here to tell you what to do or what to think. But going into Tuesday night's meeting, there was a demonstration out front for an hour before the meeting about how, you know, it's unfair that we didn't take the funding and we said no to funding and this is free money. Well, no money is ever free, right? Let's just start there and debunk that. There is no such thing as free money, right? It comes from somewhere. And so that needs to be a huge learning curve for our community. And we need to look at when we're going in and voting. In 2026, we have 2 board members who are running for re-election, and we need to look at who wants to replace them and what they stand for. Because Tim Garman was there in support of this. And the guy who's running against Kevin, he was there. I don't know that he stood out or spoke out one way or the other, but if you look at who he surrounds himself with Tim Garman kind of being the ringleader of that, Mary Rickert falling into that, I'm guessing which direction he's leaning on these issues. But again, I'm just guessing. We need to be paying close attention who has Shasta County's best interests and who is looking at what continues to enrich the establishment group within Shasta County that has created kind of the problem that we live in right now. So that demonstration kind of told me everything I needed to know. And the leader of Arch Collaborative came out and said that they did submit that application and they are moving forward with it. And so then my question to Supervisor Plummer was, when were you going to host the town hall? When were you going to tell Shasta Lake that this facility is coming to them, that this is going to be in their backyard? So I think that that needs to be a conversation that is had with the community. I'm in District 4. He's my supervisor. I wanted an answer on what what you were going to do as far as including the community in this decision before just applying for all this free money that's going to bring in all this regional stuff. So that's a big thing. But moving on, there was a presentation by the Simpson University for a Ronald Reagan Foundation program that is going to be implemented and happening and coming to the North State. And I think that that's great. Our board voted to write a letter in support of it. But it is for leadership opportunities and trainings for junior high and high school students to get involved, find out. They do workshops, how government works and how to get involved and how to understand it. And I think that's amazing. I think we need more understanding of how government truly functions, because we have too many people who show up to meetings to scream and yell and do their big theatrics, and then they leave. And that's what happened, right? We have this presentation about Ronald Reagan, and then we have public comment, and then everybody leaves. And there is still more business to be conducted. There is still more work happening. And these people leave, and they don't actually pay attention, and they don't actually get involved. And it's very disheartening to know that these are people who are voting in our community. These are people who are yelling and screaming and putting things out on the news that make other people make unconscious, uneducated decisions when they're voting. And that's why I do what I do, to give everybody a full scope of what it was that I experienced and what I witnessed and how I perceive things. And then I tell you, go do your own research. The agendas are there. They're available. Dig through the packet. Decide for yourself. I'm not going to tell you this is how it should be. I'm going to give you my opinion and my experience. And then I'm going to tell you to go do your own research and vote your conscience. But moving on, we went into, they had a presentation for the Sheriff's Department employees and the other agencies that fall into that same realm. And they were really just talking about working on and negotiating some of the things within their scope, and without even asking for a raise. It was insane. They weren't asking for like a large across the board raise. They were asking for things that are reasonable, how much accrual of vacation time that they're allowed to do. And they were comparing it to the other agencies. And then, it's insane. Again, go through and look at the packet, look at the presentation, the whole thing's in there. But then we go into closed session. There's no reportable action, but it is insane to me how much time is wasted in local government with things that don't move the needle, with things that don't truly affect us. And, we have so much going on right now in our country to keep us divided and keep us dumbed down and uninvolved. And, at the Reading budget meeting, the special meeting, Councilman Latah said something, and it stuck with me because it resonates to all of this with our local government, but even what's happening at our state and federal levels. As he said, it's hard and it's supposed to be complicated. That right there tells you should vote him and anybody else that thinks that way out, because our government is supposed to be for the people, of the people, by the people, right? Our government was designed not to be complicated, but to restrict the government from becoming huge and invasive and tyrannical. Our government was designed to be the people coming in to serve the people, make decisions for the people, and then leave, not become bureaucrats who get rich on a bloated and complicated government and budget. We have allowed our government to become this monstrosity that is, oh, sorry, you're not qualified to understand. So it's best you just stay out of it. No, vote every single one of those people out of office. Government should not be complicated. It is not complicated. It is becoming complicated to keep you distracted, to keep you confused, and to keep us divided. Because if we were to come together and say, I'm paying way too much in taxes. How is this making sense? How is my life getting any better? How are our kids coming out any better? How is this agency performing? And do we have any benefit for what we're putting into it? They don't want those questions asked because we might come together as a community. We might unite and we might take back the greatest country in the world and make it have another successful 250 years of greatness. But that right there affects the future of a one world order. That right there affects the future of this Democrat Socialist Party that's coming in with a Marxist agenda that wants to take over and destroy the greatest country in the world. When has Marxist rule ever been successful? When has a socialist government ever withstood time? Our government framework has withstood 250 years, and it cannot and it will not be destroyed or defeated unless we allow it to be. We need to contain our rights. We need to contain the design of our government, and we need to go in and cut everything that is unnecessary and confusing. We need to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. We need to put our citizens first before we go do trainings in other countries for literacy or any of that. None of that matters while we have veterans who are taking their own lives. None of that matters when we have unhoused men and women who fought for our great country. None of that matters when we have children starving here, but we're helping to build LGBTQ inclusive libraries in Uganda or whatever it is. None of that matters while we have children here in our country who are being permanently medically mutilated and sterilized for the rest of their lives. It is time to act. It is time to get involved. It is time to start paying attention. Government should not be hard. It should not be complicated. And anybody who tells you otherwise needs voted out of office. Thank you. As always, do your own research. Make your own decision. Vote your conscience, but vote. Every vote is the most important vote ever. This election, how many people are going to come out when the ballot only has one or in some areas 2 items on the ballot? Come out and vote. Make your own informed decision. Do your research and vote. It's your civic duty and your civic responsibility. Thank you and have a wonderful day.